We have this modern cultural obsession right now with telling men to open up. I mean, we hear it everywhere, right?
Yeah, constantly.
It's like we demand vulnerability. We tell them to drop their armor, to, speak their truth, and just stop holding everything in.
Right, the whole toxic masculinity discussion.
Exactly. But what if, and this is what we're really getting into today,
Huh?
what if the reality of the human experience shows us something entirely different? What if, when men actually do open up, the very people asking them to speak are often, they're the ones who punish them for it?
Yeah, that's the tragic irony of it all.
It really is. So today we're taking a deep dive into the unseen architecture of male exhaustion. And I don't mean the physical exhaustion of a long day of labor. We're talking about a profound silent collapse of the spirit.
But total internal shutdown.
Right. We're looking past that casual and honestly often dismissive label of, emotional unavailability. We want to explore this deeply exhausting journey of just trying to be understood.
And it is a journey that it often goes completely unnoticed until it's just too late.
Yeah.
Because this kind of exhaustion, it leaves no physical trace. You can't see the sweat, you can't see the shaking hands, you just see this sudden, heavy quietness.
Just a wall. So welcome in. Whether you're listening to this deep dive in a quiet room late at night or maybe driving alone in your car right now, we just want to welcome you into this space.
Yeah, take a breath. We're glad you're here.
Because we are exploring something pretty heavy today. We want to validate a reality that, honestly, so may carry in total silence. If you're listening to this right now, there's a very good chance that you, or maybe a man you love deeply, is carrying this exact silent exhaustion.
It's incredibly common, even if it's unspoken.
Right. So we're going to trace how a man goes from actively trying to explain himself to experiencing the sharp, genuine pain of being misunderstood, to retreating into silence, and then finally how that silence can actually evolve into a quiet, grounded wisdom of self-protection.
Which is a beautiful shift when it happens.
Yeah. It really is.
Yeah.
So let's begin before the silence ever sets in. Because before the quietness, there's always an attempt, right?
Always. I mean, the silence is never the starting point of the story.
Never.
It's the end result of a very long, very tiring process.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because I want to push back on a common assumption right away. Isn't calling it exhaustion just a convenient excuse for men who simply, lack the emotional intelligence to communicate?
Right. That's the standard societal pushback.
Yeah. Like, how do we know it's actual exhaustion and not just a stubborn refusal to engage or just basic avoidance?
Well, what's fascinating here is the actual cognitive load required for a man to share his internal world. We aren't talking about a lack of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
We're talking about the immense, almost physical, caloric effort of translation.
Translation. That's a heavy word.
It really is, because when a man is hurting or stressed, his raw experience is rarely considered acceptable in its natural state. It's messy, it's complex.
It's not pretty.
No, it's not. So before he even opens his mouth, he has to perform this massive amount of emotional labor. He has to take this raw, heavy thing inside of him, sanitize it, format it, and, package it into polite, digestible words.
Just so the people around him won't be overwhelmed by it.
Exactly, or offended by it.
Man, if you're listening to this and you've ever tried to explain your stress or your burnout to a partner, just think about the mental checklist you run through before you even speak.
Oh, the checklist is brutal.
It really is. You ask yourself, is she going to get mad? Will this totally ruin the evening?
Will this be used against me later?
Yes.
Yeah.
Or am I going to have to comfort them because my pain upset them? I mean, running through that mental checklist, it's an agonizing amount of work.
It is. And that checklist, that's the translation process. And it takes a massive toll on the nervous system.
Just draining.
Totally. But, the exhaustion doesn't actually set in from the translating itself. It sets in from what happens next.
The reaction.
Right. Imagine doing all of that grueling work. You carefully choose your words. You manage your tone perfectly. You hand over your vulnerability.
And it's immediately dismissed.
Yes.
Oh.
Or debated. Or met with a blank stare. Or, someone tells you that you're just overreacting.
Yeah.
The exhaustion doesn't come from a lack of caring about the relationship. It comes from the devastating realization that you just spend the very last of your internal energy translating your soul for an audience that never truly intended to listen.
It's like you're speaking a desperate, urgent language to a room full of people who completely refuse to learn the vocabulary.
That's a perfect way to put it.
You keep trying, you keep translating, and eventually your voice just gives out.
It has to.
Right. Because the silence at that point is no longer a conscious choice. It's just sheer physical and emotional depletion.
And that depletion fundamentally alters how the mind processes any future attempts at connection.
So what does this all mean for the guy who finally takes the bait? The guy who listens to society, drops his guard, and actually speaks up.
Well, it puts him in a terrible position.
Because this leads us right into an agonizing paradox. Society is out there screaming at men to share their feelings. But when they actually do it, they are not met with the warm embrace they were promised.
Not at all.
They're met with criticism, or just this palpable, awkward discomfort. So if opening up consistently results in discomfort or criticism from the listener, isn't the retreat into silence actually a highly logical survival mechanism rather than a failure of communication?
This raises an important question about how our biology actually responds to conditional safety.
Conditional safety.
Yes. It is absolutely a survival mechanism, and it's rooted deeply in our nervous system. We really have to look at the amygdala, right? The part of the brain that processes threats.
Okay, the threat center.
Right.
Yeah.
Neuroscience shows us that the brain processes social rejection and emotional dismissal using the exact same neural pathways that it uses to process physical pain.
Wait, really? The brain literally cannot tell the difference between being emotionally dismissed and being physically struck?
From a pure survival standpoint, no.
Wow.
Because thousands of years ago, if you were rejected by your tribe, it meant you were cast out into the wilderness to die. Social rejection was a literal death sentence.
So it's hardwired into us.
Exactly. So today, when a man opens up to his partner or his family, and he's met with like an eye roll, or he's told he's bringing down the vibe.
Or told he needs to just fix it.
Right. His amygdala fires as if he is under physical attack. His nervous system enters a state of fight, flight, or freeze.
And the silent retreat, that's the freeze response.
Precisely. It's the biological equivalent of playing dead so the predator will just walk past you.
Man, that's heavy.
But the deep wound here, the thing that truly breaks a man's spirit, it doesn't just come from the original pain he was carrying. It comes from the profound betrayal of trusting the invitation.
The conditional invitation.
Yes.
He's invited to share his heavy burden.
Yeah.
He's told by society, by his partner, by his friends, hey, this is a safe space.
We want to hear you.
Right. But the moment he steps into that space and reveals the messy reality of his internal world, the safety is immediately revoked.
Because the invitation was conditional on the emotions being convenient.
Wow. Convenient vulnerability.
Exactly. It was conditional on the vulnerability being easily resolved. The second his reality causes inconvenience for the listener, the empathy vanishes.
And when a man experiences that betrayal enough times, that unsafe environment absolutely guarantees the retreat into silence.
It's the only logical choice left. His biological system is desperately trying to protect itself from further harm.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because when you reframe this behavior as a deeply logical act of biological self-protection, it completely destroys how society looks at this quietness from the outside.
It completely flips the narrative.
Right, because eventually the explanations stop. The exhausting translation process stops. The man becomes totally quiet. And society is incredibly quick to slap a neat little label on that quietness. We call it emotional coldness.
Or we diagnose him as emotionally unavailable. It's a remarkably easy label to use, primarily because it requires absolutely zero introspection from the person using it.
It's a great deflection.
It is. It places the entirety of the blame squarely on the man's shoulders, framing him as broken or somehow deficient.
But the reality is entirely mechanical. I mean, we often hear the analogy of a man building a massive stone fortress to keep people out, right?
Right.
And people look at the fortress and call it cold and uninviting.
The walls are too high.
Yeah, but I think that analogy is totally wrong. It's not a fortress. It's a tripped circuit breaker.
Oh, I like that. Walk us through that mechanism.
Okay, so if you push too much voltage through an electrical system that isn't built to handle it, like constantly forcing a man to explain his pain to someone who refuses to listen, the breaker physically trips to prevent a fire.
Right.
The system shuts itself down to save the house from burning to the ground. The silence is the tripped breaker. It's a vital safety mechanism, not an empty, unfeeling house.
That makes perfect sense.
So calling a tripped breaker emotionally unavailable completely misses the reality that the system was desperately trying to handle a massive overload of current.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals how truly tragic and honestly cruel that label of emotionally unavailable really is.
It really is cruel.
Because when you hurl that phrase at a man who has retreated into silence just to save himself, you are effectively erasing his entire history of effort.
You're erasing the late nights he stayed awake, trying to figure out how to phrase his stress so it wouldn't start an argument.
Yep.
You're erasing the times he swallowed his anger and tried to speak calmly.
Yes. You erase all the times he trusted those conditional invitations. You strip away all the context of his deep longing for connection, and you punish him for the very exhaustion that you, or society at large, helped create.
Man.
It is a profound lack of empathy. It looks at a man who has systematically shut down his internal power grid to survive an overload and criticizes him for not keeping the lights on. That is heavy. Criticizing him for not keeping the lights on when you are the one who overloaded the circuit.
Yeah.
Take a breath and just sit with that reality for a second. If you're listening and you have been on either side of this dynamic, you know exactly how heavy that quiet resentment feels in a room.
It fills the entire space. You can feel it in the air.
You really can. And it brings us to a critical crossroad, because if the silence is a tripped breaker, a survival mechanism rather than intentional coldness, we have to look at what happens next. A man cannot live his entire life in a state of biological freeze.
No, he can't. That's no way to live.
Exactly. But if a man is just sitting there with his circuits tripped, isn't he just trapping himself? Like, how does that actually help him heal?
Right.
We have to transition to how this quietness evolves from a place of defeat into a space of intentional healing.
And that evolution is arguably the most important transition in a man's life. It comes down to a fundamental shift in where his locus of control resides. Wait, let's pause right there. Define locus of control for me in this specific context. Are we talking about who holds the power in the relationship?
Not exactly power over the other person, no. We're talking about where a man sources his emotional regulation.
Okay.
When a person has an external locus of control, they believe their safety and their peace depend on how others react to them.
So they're always scanning the room.
Exactly. When a man is hiding out of fear, when his circuit is tripped against his will, his locus of control is still external. He's still reacting to the world. He's still letting the fear of judgment dictate his silence.
Okay.
In a way, he is still begging for safety by trying to make himself invisible. He is essentially a thermometer, just rising and falling based on the temperature of the room around him.
He's still hoping someone will notice that he's hiding and, come rescue him.
Precisely. But an internal locus of control is entirely different. That is the shift from being silenced by exhaustion to actively choosing silence out of wisdom.
Taking the power back.
Right. You stop being the thermometer and you become the thermostat. You set your own temperature. Healing finally begins the moment a man stops performing the act of begging. When he stops trying to convince people to listen, he restores his own dignity.
He realizes that he no longer has to beg for emotional safety. I mean, that is a massive paradigm shift.
It changes everything. He looks at his vulnerability, his pain, his fears, his really rich internal life, and he realizes that this is sacred ground.
Sacred ground.
Yes, and you do not let just anyone walk on sacred ground. Not everyone deserves access to your translation.
We hear so often in modern therapy culture that closing yourself off is a weakness, that it's a way of giving up on connection. But what you're saying is that selectively protecting your peace is actually an active, powerful choice.
Weakness is continuing to hand your heart to people who repeatedly drop it, just because society tells you that a quote-unquote strong man should be open.
Right.
Weakness is ignoring the reality of conditional invitations, recognizing that your inner world has immense value, and guarding it accordingly is the ultimate act of self-respect.
That's profound.
Reserving your vulnerability only for those rare few who have proven through time and consistent action that they can hold your truth without criticism, that is wisdom. It's a quiet, deeply grounded wisdom.
It's resetting the breaker, but deciding that you are the only one who controls the switch.
Exactly.
You're not trapped in the dark anymore. You simply decide who is allowed to turn the lights on.
You no longer view the silence as a failure to communicate. You view the silence as a perfectly healthy boundary against people who just do not have the capacity to hear you.
If you're listening to this deep dive right now, I want to speak directly to you for a moment. We've covered a truly heavy, often invisible journey today.
A journey a lot of you know intimately.
We started by looking at the draining, desperate effort of trying to translate your deepest pain into digestible words, only to have them fall on deaf ears. We walked through the biological reality of the double bind, The deeply unfair paradox of being told to open up, only to have your nervous system punished when you actually do.
Which forces that freeze response.
Right. We looked at how that exhausting, survival-based retreat is so unfairly labeled as emotional coldness, completely erasing all the desperate effort you put in. And finally, we arrived here, at the quiet, dignified wisdom of protecting your peace,
Of taking back your locus of control.
of realizing you never have to beg for emotional safety again, that your silence is not a failure, it is a boundary.
And clear, uncompromising boundaries are the absolute foundation of any lasting peace.
They really are. But as we leave this quiet space today, we want to leave you with a thought to carry with you. Because while protecting your peace is absolutely necessary for your survival, genuine connection remains a fundamental human need. You can't stay entirely in the quiet forever.
You can't. And that leaves us with a lingering, profound question to mull over in the silent moments after a conversation ends.
What's that?
If true wisdom means severely limiting who has access to your vulnerability, how do we begin to identify or even quietly build those rare sacred relationships where that heavy armor can finally be set down without fear?
How do we find the people who can look at our exhaustion, our completely silent, invisible exhaustion, and instead of demanding that we translate it for them, they simply sit down beside us in the quiet and share the weight?
That's the real work.
Thank you for sharing this space with us today. We wish you peace in your quietness and wisdom in your boundaries. Take care of yourselves.